So in this video, I'm going to give a brief introduction to one of the primary sources for Second Temple Judaism. And that primary source we're going to look here is going to be Josephus. So Josephus is was a Jew who lived between 37 to 100 CE. So you can see by those dates that would put him approximately around the same time of the Apostle Paul, a little bit just after birth, at least a little bit after the death of Jesus. And so he becomes a very important resource when looking at how certain Jews may have interpreted or understood their history, but also how at least one Jew is explaining circumstances that are taking place within their own life. So some things about Josephus. Josephus has a varied background. He was a priest. I guess he spent some time as well out at with an Essene community, kind of learning a little bit about that community and its views and its practices. So he becomes an important source for understanding, or at least comparing what his understanding of the Essene movement was with what we're finding out from the community that associated itself out at Qumran and with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And he also was someone who at one time practiced the law according to the traditions of the Pharisees. And so, again, for someone who's going to give us an understanding or an insight into how Pharisees, the doctrines that Pharisees had. And so, because of that background, he's, again, an important source. He was governor, I'm going to say governor of Galilee, or at least in this area of Galilee. He had kind of a jurisdiction of watching over what was transpiring in Galilee, not in the sense of being someone who is appointed by the Romans as a governor, but somebody who is seen as an authority figure in the area, operating some administrative roles amongst Jews in the region. He becomes a Roman mediator after he is captured by the Romans. He is utilized as someone who can address Jews who are resistant to Roman rule, and so as kind of a go-between or helping Romans understand Jews and why Jews are resisting their occupation, why Jews practice what it is that they do, how Jews think, how many Jews think. So he becomes somewhat of a mediator between Roman occupation of Palestine or Roman power and as well Jewish aspirations, Jewish hopes. He's responsible for 4 major works, which I'll talk a little bit later about. One called the Jewish Wars, another one called the Antiquities of the Jews, another one called Against Apion. Apion is kind of an anti-Jew who makes several accusations about Jews, and so Josephus answers or addresses those accusations. And Josephus also writes an autobiography, which is very helpful in terms of trying to find out a little about his life, or at least the life as he presents it. So the question is he a reliable historian? Well, there are certainly some things that he says or claims that are taken as historically credible, reliable information, but at times as well, especially when it comes to numbers, in terms of the size of things, size of forces, size of resistance, size of groups, that there's some serious questions about whether or not he's gotten it right. But also we have to remember that Josephus, when he writes, he is writing as someone kind of in the employment or under the auspices or under the direction of Roman rulers, emperors. And so there's a bit of an agenda that Josephus has as he's presenting the history of the Jews and why Jews fight against other people, and how he wants to present Rome's intervention in the area. So can't just read Josephus and say, this is how Josephus writes it, and so this is exactly how it occurred. So he has to be treated with some careful, critical read. So Josephus in his early years was born, I said, 38, 37 CE, primarily to a priestly family. Prior to turning 19, he studied in the schools of Pharisees, Sadducees, even the Essenes, finally accepting to be a Pharisee. Of course, when I use the word schools, I use that lightly. We're not thinking about an academy, but we're talking about under the tutelage or under the direction or under the instructions of certain individuals, certain teachers who ascribe to a particular viewpoint. In 64 CE, he went to Rome to try and get certain priests released from the procurator. And so that kind of shows his inner workings with the Roman Empire. And one of the things that he sees as this kind of mediator again between Jews and Romans. He commanded the Galilean revolutionists until he surrendered. So after in the kind of mid-60s, there are these revolts against Roman occupation, and he helps to lead some of that revolt. And this is part of the kind of the funny story about Josephus that Josephus himself tells on him, and how these revolutionists that he was helping to lead were running from the Romans and ended up in a cave and were hiding out and basically are surrounded and realized there were no escape. And so he and another guy, there was this pact that was made that two people would assassinate or kill everybody else so that they wouldn't be left into the hands of the Romans and end up being slaves or end up being tortured. So Josephus and this other fella goes around and kills all the other revolutionists because that was the agreement. But then at the end, they decide to turn themselves in and plead for their lives with the Romans. So he's seen as something of a traitor, a coward in the eyes of many Jews, and that's probably why his works were not kind of kept or thought as reliable within Jewish communities. He believed that Jews must accommodate to the Romans to save their nation and their temple, eventually after he was defeated and captured. And so this is what he's trying to help Jews to do until such time that they show that they aren't going to accommodate themselves to the Romans, or at least many are not going to accommodate themselves. And after the takeover of the temple around 68, 69 CE until its destruction in 70 CE. After the war with the Romans and the Jews, where Vespasian made him a Roman citizen, so quite an honor, and gave him a pension and even gave him lands in Judea because he had helped out as moderating. And he dies about 100 CE. So his history is really a compilation of various Jewish and Roman sources, which sometimes he doesn't even bother to edit out contradictions. He just puts them in there. Now, and some of it he may not have been writing himself. So somebody else may be the actual pen on that. Thinking particularly here of the Jewish wars. He's probably didn't write the Jewish wars. Somebody else has written that. His history then was really an attempt to, one, convince Jews that living under the Romans wasn't bad. So this is something that can be done. They should tolerate it. That there were, certainly worse situations that the Jews could be living under. And so the Romans have a law. The Romans have certain practices of justice which can be beneficial to Jews. and also to convince Romans that war was brought about by a minority of Jews. Most Jews did not want to end up warring with Rome, but basically it was a vigilante group who kind of took over the temple, ended up killing people who had aligned with the Romans, and not to blame the actions of a few upon the rest of the Jews, but also to kind of make sure that Romans understand there are certain things that Jews will defend themselves for, or certain things that they cannot be um, forced to do that would violate, you know, the covenant or violate the law, and so they need to be very careful what it is that they think that they can expect or attempt um, to force Jews to do. So Josephus's works. Primarily, we've got the Jewish War from 75 to 79 CE, near the end of the Vespasian reign, written to excuse the majority of the Jews for the war. Again, I don't think he's the actual writer of it, but he's involved in the writing of this. There's the Antiquity of the Jews, finished somewhere around 93 to 94 CE. And this is written to show the validity of the Jews within the Greco-Roman world and kind of understanding how Roman certain values that they have and trying to present Jewish history in line with Roman values. Then there's Against Appian, written after the Antiquities at some time, not quite sure, but it's really a response to anti-Semitic propaganda, trying once again to give an apology or an explanation of Jewish ideas and teachings. And then he also wrote his life, which we don't know the date for that, but written to show that he was not to blame for the failure of the Jewish revolt. So once again, kind of an apology or a defense of his role in, first of all, the resistance, and then what ended up happening with the temple. So that's just a very brief little introduction to this major, important primary source for Second Temple Judaism.